Hi everyone, welcome to the Crown Records Management Digital Transformation podcast series. My name is Kevin Widott, the Digital Transformation Sales Lead at Crown. Very excited to have Nathan Voogt, Commercial Account Director from Preservica in the studio. Nathan, welcome.
Yeah, it's good to be here, thank you.
Excellent. So digital preservation, what is that all about?
Digital preservation is really a new area of IT and of software. It's only really in the last decade or so has become an established requirement in its own right. Really tailing all the way back to the National Archives 10 years ago, coming to us and with a requirement basically saying, we realise that we have all this content and we want to make sure that we avoid file obsolescence. And we need a way of transitioning and taking these old file formats and making sure that they're constantly preserved into the future.
Can you perhaps map out, crystallise an example of a recent client you've worked with, don't have to mention them by name, where you've come in and you've encountered a problem that perhaps you've come across in terms of getting access to content and the solution that you provided?
Sure, so I mean if you take one of our clients, Transport for London, they need to store content, a number of their pieces of equipment, so something that people use on a daily, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people use on a daily basis is their escalators. So actually the blueprints and all the health and safety documents around that need to be stored for over 60 years. That's the lifespan of an escalator in London. So being able to put this information into Preservica, ingest it into Preservica and store it and make sure that it's constantly revalidated and it's fully accessible into the future is absolutely critical to them. If you have maintenance engineers coming in, they might be coming in in 20 years time. So the original people the original engineers who built the escalator and put it in place are no longer working for TfL, the knowledge may have been lost, but so you still need to make sure that the manuals, all of the work around it, even right down to geological surveys, is preserved and can be accessed at any point as well.
So just in layman's terms for my mind, if I'm having conversations on Slack and instant messenger and text message, the A to Z, and I'm a senior board level person working in financial services, can Preservica help preserve the full spectrum? So
when it comes to new forms of communication, when we're looking at instant messaging, right the way through to Slack, for instance, these are areas which we are moving into and are looking at ways to preserve those as well. Historically, the main requirement has been around traditional content. By traditional, I mean business documents, JPEGs, the PDFs, the recognised formats like TIFF, right the way through to AV files, so MP4, MP5, and everything else. What we are also looking at is content harvesting. Now, this is the really interesting area for how preservation will adapt and evolve over time. And this is, for instance, if you look at a great example of it is Twitter. There are very important, very senior and incredibly powerful people who love Twitter and maybe love it a bit too much. Essentially, there are regional legislations which are in place which say you have to preserve that. You can't delete it. Oh, wow. Okay. And so being able to harvest from Twitter and be able to also keep that communication, because if you're in the public eye, you're never essentially off the clock. And so that's part of it. It's not. I wouldn't say the whole Twitter harvesting is absolutely critical at the moment, or probably for most people it isn't. There are some, but when you look at different content management systems, how do you ingest from different document management systems that you already have in place? How do you make that information, pull that into Preservica, so it becomes more of a seamless process? Currently, digital preservation is a man-managed process. Yeah. But if we're looking at compliance and criticality, you need to automate that, and you need to make sure that it is as slick and as quick as possible without too much intervention. And so then the archivist or the records manager is curating and they're taking care of. So their role becomes much more business value orientated rather than business critical.
Interesting. And does this is this a parallel to the evolution of the role of the records manager with new, young, born digital archive managers coming into the organisation?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think archivists as a group are definitely going through an evolution. Now, I've only worked in archival software for the last year or so. However, always working within document automation or document capture. Archivists, you meet, there's a predisposed idea that an archivist is akin to a librarian, or they sit in the basement of an organisation. They don't have much exposure outside of that, and really their value isn't necessarily recognised even within large organisations, global organisations.
Right.
And I think that is changing hugely, especially around the newer ideas coming into archival. So looking around digital archivists and GXP archivists. These are people coming into an organisation not afraid of IT, not afraid of new technology, and they're coming in and they are shaking things up in a lot of ways. And they're coming in and saying, well, look, these solutions exist now and we need to get them in place. This isn't something that we can wait for a decade. We should already be dealing with this. And that is helping massively with building the profile of an archivist and how critical their role is to an organisation. Likewise, the actual role of archivists are, as you said, that role is bleeding into records management now. And records managers are already established as being a critical part of an organisation. But there is this blending of roles happening, and you do come across more and more people which have a hybrid role of not only dealing with the immediate 1 to 7 year records and records retention and disposition for those, but then also dealing with the question of what do we do with anything that has a lifetime over 10 years. If it's over 100 years, look at mortgage documents, or life insurance policies, anything around this, just financial communications, all of this needs to be stored. And so they're learning from both sides. And so you do end up with some in the middle, which have to cover both as well. But it's really exciting, and I think that the more that businesses and organisations and institutions recognise the value of an archivist and of the role that they do, the greater that is. It's building profile around them. You see more and more jobs being advertised for this, and more archives themselves actually being started within an organisation. They're no longer outsourcing this. They're no longer just sending dump files of content to the National Archives. There's more and more which are actually saying, no, we should be doing this ourselves and actually gaining the value from it while also protecting themselves in the long term as well.
Really interesting. So just finally, I think we touched on many different areas, from digital transformation to data and document storage. GDPR has been a big buzzword, certainly this year and over the past couple of years. What can we look forward to in 2019 in your view, in and around the work that you do? What are going to be the big buzzwords and the trends?
Yeah, and I definitely agree that GDPR has been done to death, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I think that at least for the next 12 to 18 months, we've now transitioned to a period where we're seeing the results of GDPR. So the ICO is now releasing figures on how many people they have taken to court, how many people they have warned, how many organisations they've supported. They're not the big bad guys in this scenario, and actually meeting with a number of people from the ICO over the last 12 months, you realise when you hear them speak is that it's much more about supporting records managers and archivists, and their role is educating. So now I think we're going to actually be looking at what that means in the real world. There are organisations which are quite nefarious in their methods and just don't care about GDPR, and they will be found out and they will be dealt with. And likewise, there's global organisations. So while in the UK everyone ran around like headless chickens for the last 24 months in some cases, and some are still doing it now. I think on a global scale, because an organisation deals with Europe or the UK once there's a split. There's still going to be a lot more around this as to what are the immediate impacts of that. And likewise, you see many regions which are now taking on the aspects of GDPR and creating their own legislation around that, which is very much based off the GDPR principles and the articles within GDPR. Looking at a wider scale, it's tough to say. I tend not to look too far out. I think the ones that I can probably...
Sales cycles.
Yeah, well, so the ones which I think I have my own personal interest in very much comes from my background anyway. So where I've already got knowledge, because at the end of the day, I'm not technical. So my understanding is much more of a layman's understanding. But ideas around robotic process automation is really interesting. How you can... Companies which have digitized all of their documents are, some of them paper-free now, looking at how they can automate quite complex human processes using mirrored process automation, how that relates into AI and actually then mimicking the human to teach a robot. That for me is really interesting, and how that can spread. From our point of view, we are looking at these areas as well, and we're seeing what lessons can be learned from the technology which is further out from the adoption cycle. But yeah, I think that those two at least are the main ones. And then we'll see what happens around GDPR and what the actual results are, because I think everyone's now waiting to really see what the fallout was, whether it was I don't want to go too far down it, but was it another Y2K, or was it actually is there genuine impact which it's had that is positive for those which have adopted it.
Watch this space. Nathan Voogt, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.